It has been a beautiful journey, yet with a lot of milestones and cornerstones. Imagine the early 90s where there were IT parks sprouted across the country, driven by visionary leaders who only wanted to connect India with the rest of the world. And fast forward to now, India is at the forefront of AI, analytics, and deep tech revolution. And for all the investors who are looking for the next big opportunity, for all the founders who want to build a great future, and for all the operators who are driving the system, the story of the Indian infotech is far from now. And that is why we have to say that we have to right now board on a vehicle that will take us from the humble beginning to the unparalleled opportunities that are lying ahead in the Indian infotech industry. To moderate this session on the Indian fintech, the evolution and future outlook for founders, operators and investors, let me bring up on the stage with all due respect Mr. Vineet Mohan, the co-founder of Konglo, an active global investor community who was previously the international manager at HSBC, specializing in payment and transaction banking, now building a seasoned team in the Gen AI application layer. Thank you so much. And now once again, let's bring onto the stage with absolute respect someone who have moved into India in 2012. Supposedly for 1 year to start the Wonko India's operations, but 1 year has now become more than 13. Let us bring on the stage a global fintech leader with over 20 years of experience working for, investing in, and fighting international financial services business. Let us all put our hands together to be inviting on the stage Ms. Lizzie Chapman, a co-founder of ZestMoney, which has raised over $120 million in equity capital, many multiples of that in debt, and surpassed a net revenue of $50 million annually. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your graceful presence. And now let us bring upon the stage Mr. Rahul Handa, the co-founder at Masha Healthcare, who is dedicated in reviving and building the BIM. He has past experience of developing ONDC that provides for a future filled with consulting across various geographies and verticals. Can we kindly have on the stage Mr. Rahul Handa? Let us all put our hands together to be welcoming this gentleman. And lastly, joining with us for this very enlightening and very curious session, we have once again Mr. Madhavan Ramakrishnan, a tech entrepreneur with a long history of driving growth and formulating successful digital strategies. Let us all invite onto the stage this founder at Techfriar. So can we kindly have you join with us? Joining with us, we once again, Mr. Madhavan Ramakrishnan. And with that, I guess we shall now explore the evolution of Indian fintech and the unparalleled opportunities lying in the future. So handing over the charge to our moderator, so please.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. Hi everyone, I'm Vineet Mohan. I hope I'm audible. If someone could just raise their hand at the back. Okay, great. So yeah, very excited to be here. Thank you for the kind of brief introductions. We've got a very interesting panel today, and we've also got a very interesting topic, which I'm sure everyone's looking forward to hear more about. But maybe just to set the scene a little bit, I'd love for our panelists to kind of elaborate on their backgrounds a little bit, so that we all can get a sense of how they stumbled into fintech, right? The topic or the theme for today. Maybe I'll start with you, Lizzie, if you wouldn't mind.
Can you hear me? Yeah, that's better. You know what? My fintech story starts here in Kochi. I'm not joking. I actually spent the first half of my career as an investor in banks, which is a great way to learn about how bad banks can be and what they do wrong. And in that learning, I went on a quest to find alternative models to banking. And that led me to India as an investor. And the first Indian investment I did was a company called Muthoot Finance. And because it was a private company at the time, this was 15 years ago, we didn't have a lot of data and information. So the company I worked for in London sent me to Kochi for 1 month to live with the family, I'm not joking, and understand gold lending. And I traveled all around Kerala. I had this very ring that I'm wearing assessed for its gold content in a gold lending shop. And I really was impressed and wowed by the smoothness and the operating efficiency of this gold lending business. We invested a lot of money, we made a lot of money, and after that I realized there are alternatives to banks. And that's what I would say, fintech is just a buzzword. What fintech really represents is, can we design the way that money flows, moves, sits around the economy in different ways that are not traditional banks? And Kerala's been doing it for decades.
Thanks, Lizzie. That's very interesting. Maybe you, Rahul, how did you get into fintech?
I'm still not sure I'm in fintech. I actually started my career in finance about 2.5 years back. Prior to that, I've been a consultant and fund stuff like that. And when I joined ONDC, when we didn't have a head for taking care of fintech, and my boss turned around and said, "Why don't you go do this?" I'm like, "What?" So I got into the business of fintech and trying to figure out how reconciliation and settlements and all of those fun things will work. Of which, by the way, I didn't even know what they meant. So I was literally reading up stuff. And then I started interacting with the banks, and they would say one thing, and somebody would say something. And then I was told, don't believe everything that everybody says. The only God gospel truth to life is what RBI puts out. Okay? So I started reading up RBI notes. And that's how I started. And then about 9 months back, I had the opportunity to join NPCI. And I am part of something called BHIM, the BHIM UPI application. Now, as a question for all of you, let's see how many of you are actually listening and not just sitting here. How many of you have BHIM on your phones now? Just about sounds right. Seriously? That's all? Okay.
Some work to do, Rahul, I think, in Kerala.
Yeah, no, but so first things first. Pull out your phones. Let's see you start downloading BHIM.
Great. Okay, so some marketing already has begun here from the panel. But let me also then move on to Maddie. How did you get into fintech?
So I got into fintech more out of necessity than passion. So I moved to Dubai after living in the UK for 10 years. In 21, I set up a company there, as most entrepreneurs do. And I found that there were many processes that were, I would say, I couldn't find online. So we always had to go find agents / consultants to do a lot of compliance work, which was very straightforward, both in the US and in the UK. So I thought it's better that I solve this problem that I face myself. So we built OneView to solve that problem, and that's how I got into proper fintech.
Got it. Okay, so I think we'll dive a bit deeper into the topic, and maybe I thought it might be helpful for the audience here that I set the scene a little bit, right? So when we talk about fintech in India today, it's a massive industry, right? So obviously many of you have heard of some of the most prominent players in the market, your PhonePays, your Paytms, your Zerodha and Grow apps, your Policy Bazaars. But actually the volume of fintechs in India is around 10,000 fintech companies that are registered in India, which makes India the third largest ecosystem for fintechs after the US and UK. The combined valuation of these companies is around 120 billion plus. 25 plus of these companies are valued at over $1 billion. And around 20 companies have actually moved from being private and made it to the public markets in the last 20 years. So there's a fair bit that's happened in the fintech ecosystem, as you can imagine. But I also appreciate, and this is something I'm sure the panel appreciates as well, that we have a fairly diverse crowd here. People who are, some of you are young professionals, some business owners, some entrepreneurs. So we thought maybe let's take a step back. We can level the playing field a little bit and try and demystify it first before we get into more of the details, right? So maybe back to you, Rahul. The first question could be, what is fintech, right? And how is it different from what we all know, banks and financial services? So maybe let's start with that. If you can just demystify it for us.
I think he's throwing me under the bus, right? Okay. So my view of fintech is anybody who's going to help move money. And money in any form. Whether it is to pay for a particular transaction, which is people like me come into play, or there is any form of a banking transaction at the other end of the spectrum where they are managing your money, or somebody else who's also making sure that you're making money. So for me, from a outside-in view perspective, I'm going to say anybody who's helping you transact and move money is going to be the person who can say, I'm a fintech. Okay? Also, there should be some kind of a regulatory framework on you. You're not just moving money to your own account kind of stuff. So as long as you're doing it ethically, properly, legally, I think we should be fine.
All right. No, that's great, Rahul. And I think the other aspect, obviously, the technology piece and how that has become a massive enabler, especially in a country like India, right? Just given the size that we have. Where fintechs can sometimes be a bit more agile than the more traditional companies.
See, actually, to add to your point, in a group like this, I kind of take it as the tech is a given, right? I think in this room alone, we should have more tech brain power than what most other countries may have. So, as a matter of fact, I've had the pleasure and the honor of having sat into quite a few people coming in from outside of India, and when they were talking to us about what is going on from a DPI, a digital public good perspective, etc., what we are doing, whether it was with ONDC or within NPCI. And the funny part of it is they turn around and say, so how many people are you doing this for? First questions we turn around and say, oh, we're doing it for that many number of crores. That they don't get, then we have to convert to millions and billions and all of that. But when we turn around to people and say, we're doing it for this many number of millions of people, they are stunned because they turn around to us and say, the scale of what you are doing in India, just for a POC, right? My POC might be 25 million people. My POC might be 30 million people. They turn around and say, my entire population is not that much. Their entire population might only be like 10, 15, 20 odd million people. My POC, my proof of concept is 25 million people.
Incredible. I think that the scale is just very different in a market like this. So I guess just moving on to the next step, right? So we know what fintech is. I think it'd be very interesting to understand how has it evolved in the last 10, 15 years. And I think no one better than you, Lizzie, in some ways. You've been in the space for 10 plus years. You moved to India. I didn't know the Muthoot story, but that adds in another layer of interest to it. But love to hear your take on how has the sector evolved.
And it's funny, I do feel like the OG on the panel. Now you've told us this story. So I've been in fintech in India since 2010. And it's really hard to explain how much has changed. When I first arrived, we had, at that time, 40 million internet users, right? So imagine that. This was the days when you actually used to keep your mobile data switched off on your phone most of the time. Do you remember that? And you would just switch it on if you needed to send a message, because it was so expensive. And yet still, I had a very clear belief that this would become the largest fintech market in the world. And it was so obvious to me because consumers in this country are not just the youngest and smartest in terms of digital savviness, but actually are the most open-minded when it comes to trying out new products. That's the good news for people building products in India. So what happened? What happened is you had a bunch of very dramatic innovations. India is described as a leapfrog market, right? So we might do something slowly, and then we will literally jump over the rest of the world and do it 10 times bigger and better. And that's exactly what happened with the internet. We went from 40 million people not being able to afford data to 900 million people having the cheapest data in the world 24/7 on their mobile device, right? So we actually leapfrogged the laptop, the desktop, all the other versions of the internet that the rest of the world was coming on. And what that meant was we could unlock new forms of digital infrastructure for financial services that the rest of the world could never imagine. And that's when it got very exciting. So around 2012, we got something called IMPS. Does anyone remember what IMPS was? It's funny because actually the launch of IMPS was probably the most important thing that has happened in this country in a very long time. IMPS was the protocol that allowed money to move instantly from bank account to bank account, real time. Today, we now have UPI, thanks to IMPS. But nowhere else in the world can you move money from bank account to bank account real time, still to this day, right? So the concept of real-time payments, India invented, promoted, and has now become a household name. And so we should be really much more, I think, conscious and aware of what we have in front of us. And that was just the beginning. The success of IMPS gave a huge boost and confidence to the government, to the regulator, and a lot of practitioners around to build Aadhaar, the biggest identity stack in the world. Again, we are the only country in the world that has more than 90% of the population KYC'd, identified in a database. And all of this happened in a couple of years, really quite dramatically. Just the way that we distributed 1 billion COVID vaccines in a couple of weeks, we managed to get 1 billion people using digital financial infrastructure in a couple of years. That happened in our lifetime, and it hasn't happened anywhere else in the world, and it probably won't, because the rest of the world has a very different philosophy to making things work. So now we're in the golden era, we're in the heyday. Fintech entrepreneurs like to complain about regulation and red tape and things like that. But actually, we have to look at the glass is more than half full. We have the best digital infrastructure on earth to build financial products for everyone, no matter where they sit and no matter what kind of income level they are on. So I predict the next 10 years are going to be even bigger than the last 10 years for value creation. It's just the beginning, and you will see business models and fintech products coming out of this country that the rest of the world could never have imagined or devised or delivered.
No, thank you, Lizzie.
Sorry,
I think.
can I add?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So, to the DPI story, and one of the reasons I went into ONDC was because of the idea of being able to give back to Bharat, to work with Bharat. If I can take some of you back, and I don't know how many of you were around for in 2008, etc. But in 2008, adding to her story, right? India was one of the world's worst unbanked countries. Less than 20% of adults in India had bank accounts. Massive problems. We couldn't send out DBT, etc., etc. We couldn't do the direct benefit transfers, etc. And one of these international organizations was brought in, and they turned around to us and said, it'll take you 48 years to get to, say, about 75% banked. Anybody wants to guess how long it took us? Guess. She just said it. 8 years. Okay? It took us 8 years, and 80% of the people in India now have bank accounts. During COVID, the US used to take about 3 months to send out COVID checks. Do you know how much time it took us? It took us 3 days. We used to transfer to about 2.5 million people. We were transferring over $300 million worth of money in 3 days. After COVID, because of all the DPI that we had built out, India could open up faster. So the standard story, right? Our now finance minister was in the US and he went out for dinner. And they turn around and say, please show us your COVID certification and all. So people he's with start pulling out pieces of paper and opening it out and saying, here's my certificate. He opens up his phone and got tap, tap, tap. Arogya Setu, here is my app. They're like, what is this? So, guys, you have to now start thinking differently, that the world that used to say it was developed is not doing as much as where we are now sitting here and saying, guess what? The world follows us. The world now looks at us.
No, it's very true, and I actually resonates with me, Rahul. I was in the US at that point in time, and COVID was very different there. Actually, talking about real-time payments, we spoke about UPI. I think the US just launched real-time payments last year, and that's the hub of innovation, right? So, and I think to Lizzie's point earlier, leapfrogging is the right word, and technology has enabled that in a big way. Just to take a different view, and I will request my panelists to stick, maybe we've got a few more questions to cover, so let's stick to 2-3 minutes per question, and we'll give some time for the audience at the end as well. But I'd love to get Maddie's take as well. He's largely been building in fintech overseas, UK and UAE. What's the outside-in view on Indian fintech?
So the outside-in view is that India is awesome, because India's fintech space is by far way more mature than any of the markets that I've worked with. And a lot of that has to do with UPI, as everyone knows. But a lot of that also has to do with our inherent mentality. I think we as a people, we all want to grow. I think there's a collective ambition among the tech people in India, the youth of India, and that's actually reflecting in how we are building companies. So I'll be very specific. So you mentioned the US is trying to get onto real-time payments. So I have a US bank account. I still have not figured out how to use it because it's too damn complicated. So I live in Dubai now. So in the UAE, we have a real-time payment solution called Ani, just recently launched, like probably less than a year ago. It works, it's perfect. But in terms of number of people using it, extremely low. In terms of India, number of people using UPI, extremely high. So even in countries where the infrastructure exists, the will of the government exists, still adoption does not exist. That's why India is very unique, where the infrastructure is awesome and people actually use it. And I'm sure most of you know this, many of you don't. The government is actually subsidizing a lot of our UPI payments, which we take for granted, for free. I mean, who do you think is paying for your massive servers and whatnot, the entire infrastructure? It's the government who's paying it. And that cannot happen in every country in the world. In several countries of the world, the governments may not have the will and the grit to make it free for everyone for so long.
No, great point. I think Rahul was referencing that earlier as well. The idea of DPI, right? Digital public infrastructure. What America has, and with roads and rails and bridges, we have in massive digital infrastructure, which is enabling a lot of other things to come up in the country. Okay, great. So let's move on, right? Let's shift gears a bit. We've had the history lesson. Now let's take the crystal ball out a little bit, right? So I guess It'd be good to understand, I think, Lizzie, you made the point earlier that there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, I'll give you a quick stat. UPI, I think UPI volumes are, I think we've crossed MasterCard, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of volumes, and MasterCard is global. And yet, UPI, if I'm not mistaken, is only used by 40% of the country. So still significant gap, right? And that's just payments. Any sectors has a similar story. So maybe one for you, Rahul. Can you give us a view on what are the untapped opportunities today in fintech for maybe the next 5-10 years, or maybe even a longer time frame?
Anything and everything. He said 3 minutes, right? Okay. So think about it like this. As long as you're staying on the right side of the law, and you're adhering to the guidelines, and by the way, if there is a difference in guidelines, the regulators are completely open to listening to everybody and saying, okay, what is the new thing that you need? But find a faster way, find an easier way, and most importantly, find an easier and cheaper way of doing things. Why is it that just moving money is the only thing? Why are you moving that money? Figure that out. As long as we are able to get into that nitty-gritty of saying, what is the money I'm moving for? Why am I moving that money? And hence I am moving that money faster, cheaper, easier, where the overall user experience is kept so that it gives a delight to the customer, we'll be fine. So any and every segment in the money movement / fintech space is still open to be disrupted again. Anybody who's already disrupted it and you think that they've already been doing it for the 5 years and hence they're set, doesn't mean that it is the only way to do it. Maybe you have a better way to do it. Figure it out. Anything is open.
Sure. No, and across sectors as well, right? Payments is one, but you look at anything, lending, insurance, significant white space still. The other interesting topic, I think, which perhaps might be of interest to folks in the audience, Lizzie, is, we have a large domestic market, we have prominent players, but how is Indian fintech doing globally?
And that's a really big topic at the moment. I've actually shifted into that space. So make in India for the world. I think that's going to be a huge theme in the next 10 years. I think finally we are confident enough of our product skill sets, our technology capabilities to go over to the US and say, we can build this better than you can. I'll just give you an example. Every year, American banks spend more than $10 billion just maintaining the existing tech stack that they have. $10 billion. And that's really antiquated technology that we're talking about. They're maintaining, systems that were built 30 years ago, often in code that the programmers don't even do anymore, like Cobalt. Can anyone code in Cobalt? Okay, here we go. We're of that generation. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is, in the next 10 years, there will have to be an enormous overhaul of all that technology all over the world. All the European and American banks using this 30-year-old technology are going to have to change it. They will be forced to by their governments and regulators. And I truly think India is best placed globally to mop up that, because the replacement cost is multiples of that 10 billion, right? That's literally revenue available for all of us to go and capture. And we have the best teams, we have the best experience to do it because we've tested our products on much, much bigger networks and systems, right? So if you can build, let's say, a KYC solution that SBI can use, and like you say, do a POC with 25 million people, you're already bigger than any KYC company in Europe, by far. So it's a really, really, really huge opportunity. You're seeing it finally being tapped. There are companies like M2P. Does anyone know M2P? They have a Carolyn team, a little bit. They are now 70% of their revenue is coming from Middle East and North Africa. They're huge in Saudi. I think M2P, which is a local homegrown company, is the #1 core banking technology platform in Saudi today. Perfios, another homegrown Bangalore company, they are now getting about 50% of their revenue from the Middle East and going to the US next. My only advice would be stop only thinking about adjacent markets like Middle East. US is wide open right now, wide open. Their technology is so far behind what most of us are experiencing every day in financial services. So I'm very heavily investing in backing, supporting companies that want to build in India and launch in the US as the primary market.
Thanks, Lizzie. Great insights. Just coming back to you, Maddie, I think we've spoken a lot about fintech, but we've forgotten about the good old banks. It's not like they're not significant anymore, right? In fact, they're more significant than before. But I think it'd be good to understand, right? What is the equation between fintechs and banks? How can they help each other? Any thoughts on that?
I have many thoughts on that. I'm just moderating in my head right now on what I should say, because I'd still like to be friends with Rahul after this panel. So, so I would say in India, these days, there's no difference between a fintech and a bank. I think they've come so close to each other, especially with the launch of neobanks, digital banks, banks that don't have branches. So very recently, I was using an application in India called Fi. I don't know what to call it. It's a bank. And the back end of this bank is run by Federal Bank, right here, 10 minutes from here. That's the back end of this bank, which is a completely digital bank. And I was blown away with what kind of service they're providing. They are providing crazy good service. And they're not a bank. They don't have a banking license. They have a team sitting, I think, in Dehradun or Delhi, if I'm not mistaken. And they're providing full-blown banking services. So these days, you don't really need a full banking license from RBI to actually launch your own bank brand. And that's basically a fintech. So I think the difference between fintechs and banks are narrowing down big time. Because my bank allows me to buy US stocks. Many fintechs do that as well. My bank allows me to invest in many things, take out loans. So maybe taking out loans may be I think the litmus test when it comes to neobanks and banks. But apart from that, I think fintechs and banks are almost the same in India these days.
All right. Sounds like a happy marriage story.
No. Wait.
You want to chip in, Rahul?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. I actually think that there is a difference between fintechs and banks, but it's a symbiotic relationship because one cannot exist without the other. Okay? So that is the difference. Because the actual holding of money is still with the bank. I mean, all of us, yes, we are upfront, yeah, we like tech, etc., etc. But my money I want in a bank here, right? So the good thing about fintechs and banks is that as long as there is that symbiotic relationship happening, where the services are being provided by the fintech, but the liability and the accessibility to money, as well as the base of the security that comes with the money is held with the bank, things will work very, very well.
I agree with that, like 100% I agree with that. And what I'm thinking is fintechs are moving very, very closer to banks. And I'm assuming that at some point in time, our government may launch a startup banking license. That trend is happening in many countries around the world, especially in the UK that's happening. That may happen. And I'm predicting that within the next 5 years, RBI will have some sort of sandbox ecosystem for fintechs to become payment banks and then slowly full-blown banks.
Right, now that's fair. And I think we've seen a little bit of that in India as well and other markets too. And actually, Cochin is a hotbed for fintech and bank partnerships. I mean, Federal Bank, South Indian Bank, very progressive when it comes to partnerships. Okay, so clearly I didn't time the questions very well. I have 3 questions which I want to cover, so 1.5 minutes each, guys, please. And this is to target 3 specific audiences in the crowd. So first one, I'll start with you, Maddie, this time. You're a serial founder, right? You've founded several companies. There are people in the audience who are either building or want to build. Any advice on how to go about building in fintech?
Building like tech products?
Building a fintech product.
Building a fintech product, okay. May I answer this in Malayalam if you don't mind? Is there anyone in the audience who does not understand Malayalam? Okay, great. Develop ചെയ്യാൻ പണ്ടത്തെ പോലെ ബുദ്ധി ആവശ്യമില്ല. So earlier, if you asked me this question a year and a half ago, I would have probably said, learn Python, learn R, go do this course and this and that. But I think 2024 has changed all that. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് അറിയും ആൻഡ് മാത്സ് അറിയിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നിങ്ങൾക്കൊരു ഫിൻടെക് പ്രോഡക്റ്റ് ഉണ്ടാക്കാം. ബിക്കോസ് കോഡ് നിങ്ങൾ എഴുതേണ്ട ആവശ്യമില്ല, കോഡ് എഴുതാൻ എൻജിൻസ് ഉണ്ട്. ആ കോഡ് മനസ്സിലാക്കാനുള്ള ബുദ്ധി മാത്രമേ ആവശ്യമുള്ളൂ. സോ ദ ഹോൾ face of development, software development for fintech or any other industry is going to change so much in the next, I would say, 12 to 18 months, that a lot of these entry-level jobs are either going to become redundant or they will have to upskill themselves and learn how to program these Gen AI engines. And for that, you only need to know English and maths. If your English and maths is good, you are now a developer, you are now a designer, you are now a consultant, you can be all of those things, and logic. These are the three things.
That's brilliant, Maddie, and I think makes total sense with how quickly the world is changing now with generative AI. Moving on, maybe to you, Rahul. Youngsters in the audience who want to get in, how can you succeed in fintech? If you're a young college student trying to break in, is it the right space to get into? And if so,
what he said. English, math, and what we are also predicting out is that with the idea of with Gen AI, etc., coming into play, as long as you can articulate your idea, the system will generate the code. Okay, then maybe somebody needs to do an eyeball test on the code, but otherwise, yes, absolutely get into fintech. It is the place where money is, and if you're not close to where the money is, you won't make money.
Jugaad, we are good at it.
I think Jugaad just comes by default.
No, but Jugaad, yes, but as long as you also make sure that you're doing customer delight. Okay, Jugaad, okay, but Jugaad should not be like I'm just putting a sellotape on something and letting it run. Make sure it runs properly. Don't take shortcuts. Major thing, right? Don't take shortcuts. Do it properly.
Great advice. And I think some of this design and aesthetics is also coming into our product building, which probably wasn't there to the same level previously. All right, final question to you, Lizzie. You said you started off as an investor in India. Any insights on people who might want to get some investment exposure to the sector?
And first of all, I am not a financial advisor. Do not take advice from me or generally people that tell you what to invest in on YouTube. But I have made a lot of money in fintech. And my top tips would be, number one, be careful. It is a very regulated space. And no matter how good the product is and how smart the team is, they can get on the wrong side of regulation, and you will not be able to predict that. So hedge your bets, never put all your stocks in one basket. I would also say avoid companies that are in that awkward, like 5 to 10-year-old stage, because they may not be able to quickly react to the changes we've talked about, particularly the DPI and the AI, right? They're not going to be able to quickly update their products. So I focus myself on very early stage companies that I think can move much faster and innovate quickly. So if you can get into any angel clubs, I would recommend it. But again, take a hedged approach. And then the other thing I do is I invest in public markets where I see value in fintech. I'm not going to give the names, but a big one listed today, so you can look that up. But I also have a top tip, which is, we've talked about this on the panel, look at the banks who are doing very intelligent fintech partnerships. I've always been a big believer in this collaboration hypothesis. And from the time when I worked with banks, I worked out which ones had a really good head for technology. So people like ICICI, Ugro, Hero FinCorp, these are MBFCs as well. they have a very, very, very good approach to partnership with fintechs. That might be one of the best ways to get fintech exposure, quite honestly. And I would say buy, hold, and don't look at it for 10 years, and yeah, you'll be good.
Brilliant. I think, I think that's a very good filter. What banks is a fintech working with, I guess. All right, I think we've done well with time here. So thank you to three of you. But I think we need to open it up to the audience and maybe take a few questions from the audience. Anyone? Yeah, maybe you want to start? A mic for the audience?
Sorry, I was a bit late to the event. Well, talking about finance, I guess I create content about crypto, Web3. You know what they say? They say that business makes money first and then the regulation comes. So where do you guys see the whole evolution of crypto going in the fintech side? Because it is indeed a disruptive, innovative idea. So when we talk about the current market cap of crypto, just around roughly 2% of what gold is, but we see that it's going to break in any time, probably in the next 5 years or so. So where do you guys see the market of cryptos going in terms of fintech or, yeah, that's it.
I guess right now it only seems to be going up, right? Bitcoin is at 100K, but anyone who wants to take that question? Yeah.
I'll take that. I would say in India, a few of our ministries move much quicker than other ministries. So the finance ministry moves very quickly, which is why you are seeing a lot of people actually enter into the crypto space in India legally. In fact, there is a unit inside RBI called FIU. It's the Financial Intelligence Unit. The Financial Intelligence Unit is surprisingly very open to innovation. And I know this from a first-hand account. So good friends of mine, Edul, they started this company called Mudrex. They were in my batch in Y Combinator. And Mudrex, so there is no regulation, right, for crypto in terms of amendments and all of that. But there's tax implications, and that has been clearly laid out. So Mudrex got in touch with the RBI, the FIU unit. They're working with the FIU unit to make sure that compliance is in place. Your KYC, KYB is in place. So I feel in India, the government and even the bureaucracy is actually very open to innovation. So even a behemoth like RBI, which moves at a glacial pace when it comes to this, has moved at a rocket ship pace to work with innovative companies and to make sure that innovative products are out in the market. And coming back to crypto, specifically crypto, not all crypto is good. There's good crypto and bad crypto. So you have to be very careful when you use the word crypto because that can mean anything. You have to be very careful when you're talking about decentralized entities, centralized entities. You're looking at the proof of issuance, who is issuing it. Do you have KYC, KYB in place of the people who have issued it? How is it monitored? Who is auditing it? Who is auditing the auditors? There's a lot of regulation to be put in place before we can achieve all of that. But at least the first steps are solid in India. And we are going at a very good pace when it comes to crypto. Very soon, again, I'm hoping within the next few years, you are going to see more good regulation come out for crypto. And a lot of exchanges in India right now, they have been provided with banking services. So that's another positive about the banks as well. Even banks as well have now started giving banking services to these exchanges, especially when they're working with the FIU unit. So I see crypto taking off in India big time in a good way.
Thanks, Maddie. And I think I just want to add there, I think that point about good and bad crypto is very important because, I was just talking to a founder friend of mine who sold his infrastructure company today. It's not public news yet, but they built CBDC technology that many banks are using. And again, it's a technology that people are trying, RBI is trying, the government of India is trying for subsidy payments and stuff like that. So I think there is a lot of interest in seeing how we can use it for relevant use cases. So there is that aspect as well. So not everything is necessarily bad. There's a lot of interesting applications as well. All right, next question. Okay, we've got someone there.
Hey, I'm Senu. I'm the founder of MyCare Health. I've been building this company for last 3 years, scaled to 12 cities. We have a 120-member team here. One thing which is clear, building a healthcare company, healthcare approaching only as a healthcare, it is broken. So we slightly started adopting fintech, that comes to a fin health right now. So that's starting there. Just want to add two things. Indian middle class, which is 900 million people, in the lens of healthcare, what I have seen is that the middle class people, the cash patient does not have money. The insurance patient does not have coverage. The credit patient does not have CIBIL score. And they are not able to go for the healthcare thing. So I want the question is for Lizzie chap. How can we enable, how can we empower, how can we power this consumer? Look, 60% of the population in India is still out-of-pocket expense. 55 million Indians are going to poverty every year because of the catastrophic healthcare expense. So until unless we empower these people with the fintech or the financial access, they will not able to go for healthcare. So there is a use case which is strongly building on the layer of fintech, solving for healthcare, but that required, it's not just a NBFC because 700 CIBIL score for a middle class people, I'm not seen. So a Swiggy delivery boy, he required a pile surgery, definitely he required 1,20,000, a coverage will be only 1,20,000 he has to arrange. The CIBIL score might not able to cover. So how can we see access to this middle class people of India?
I'm happy to take that. Yeah, so we in ZestMoney would do a personal loan product, and you won't be surprised to know that 70% of the people who took the personal loan product took it for a healthcare expense, normally an emergency healthcare expense, exactly what you're describing. And the reason that's relevant is, unfortunately, if I'm very honest about the scorecard of how have entrepreneurs in fintech in India delivered, we've delivered very, very well on payments. We've delivered very, very well on trading, investing. We talked about Fee and Grow and all these great apps. In the space of lending, unfortunately, as a group of entrepreneurs, we have mostly lent to the same people who were already getting loans from the banks. And that's not what fintech is designed to do. Fintech should have been, just because of the lower operating cost, better at solving the problem you've just described, which is basically smaller ticket, instant loans to people in need who may or may not have an existing credit relationship with a bank. We still today in this country have less than 60 million credit card users. And whilst credit card is not the solution for what you're describing, I'm using that as a proxy, because if you have a credit card, you have a CIBIL 700 probably, which means you have access to a personal loan, etc. That is only 60 million people. That's it. Beyond that, we all know credit is still very expensive and very insufficient in the way that it flows. And I actually come from a very working class family in the UK. But in the UK, 100% of people have access to low-cost credit. I could take a student loan at 0.5% to go to university, and everybody in the UK has access to that unanimously. And I'm afraid I won't be satisfied with my work in fintech until we have the same kind of ratio in this country. Good news is DPI is coming. We have got the best DPI coming down the pipe. ONDC FS was designed specifically for these kinds of use cases. There is another program called Open, and there is a new team coming along called PSL, who are designing ways to deliver these products from traditional lenders. But there's lots of work to be done, and I would strongly encourage more entrepreneurs to look at this space, particularly health and education lending, big areas that we need to all be working on. Thank you for bringing it up.
If I can add to that, there is another element to it, right? There is a providing credit for something which is unforeseen. However, from an Indian perspective, I believe we also have less than 5% of people who carry insurance. India is still a very insurance push product part to it, right? The rest of the world has come to realize that, look, things like healthcare is extremely expensive. So they build for it in their insurance premiums itself. However, again, insurance is also generally pitched out mostly as a tax saving model. Okay? So maybe we need to look at it from a slightly different perspective of saying that, look, insurance needs to be pushed out and at different constructs, whether you're going to look at, from a healthcare perspective, what are the PEDs that are going to come into place, right? The pre-existing conditions. Can you bring those down? Can you bring down the amounts? Can you bring down the amount of coverage, etc., etc.? So if we can look at that, that along with the credit can be a good solve for things. That being said, the government has also been working on a lot of stuff like the PMJ products, etc. I don't know if you're aware of it. So there is a lot of stuff which is already happening from a government perspective also, which a lot of people have not really availed of because they don't necessarily know that it kind of exists. But the government has a lot of schemes out there to try and help out. So from your perspective, I would suggest that you also run some kind of, as Lizzie was saying, a kind of an educational program to say, here are the government benefits in case you don't have it. Secondly, upfront, start looking at helping the insurance side to it also come out. And then comes the credit, which can be like a top up to the insurance, right? And yes, the ONDC FS, the ONDC Financial Services, has been actually been brought out to do exactly this, to work on constructs where they're going to look at the bottom of the pyramid only. Because the top of the pyramid has everything that they need, right? Those of you carrying iPhones are not necessarily part of the segment that we talk at, maybe. I'm just kidding. But eventually, if I'm going to look at it, I'm going to turn around and say, there has to be an interface point for the customer or the requirer of this particular thing to come into some kind of a buyer application. That buyer application needs to send one request to the ONDC gateway. And I'm sorry, I'm pitching out ONDC. But that ONDC gateway will now pitch it out to various sellers of that particular product or that service. And all of them will respond back to that particular buying application. And that buying application will just list out and say, here are the rates for this, here is the rate for this. Now the customer is empowered. Now the customer is going to choose and say, yes, I want this. Whether they're buying insurance or they're going to buy credit or they're going to avail of credit, any of those different things. ONDC is a good form for you to also evaluate. Plus, I don't know if you've also looked at the NHA model, the National Health Authority side to it. The National Health Authority also has something called ABDM, the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. Please have a look at that one also. There is an entire construct built out for you to be ABDM compliant, whether it is M1, M2, M3, and what all you can do with that.
Thank you. Who's next? Okay, we have someone up front.
Hello. Yeah, myself, Fasil Paloli from Ospo Innovations. And I want to ask one thing that previously Mr. Madhavan has said that crypto regulations are, the inclusions by the government for crypto has been raised. And my concern is that when the detailed crypto transactions arise in a decentralized manner, what will be the stand for government-operated RBI or such regulations in India as such? And what will be the scenario, what will be the platform, and how will be there, especially from the side of NPCI like UPI, there will be any possibility to come from a tech stack like UPI, which to integrate the cryptocurrencies, and what will be the platform, both things also. Okay.
So I cannot speak for RBI, but generally any regulator in the world would want to know who is sending money and where they are sending money, and who is receiving the money, and how they are sending money. So these are the things that any regulator in the world will want to know, because that's literally their job description. They have one job to do, which is this: keep track of the money. So any money that you cannot keep track of would not be viewed favorably by any regulator in the world. I don't want to speak about RBI because this is common mindset for any regulator in the world. And crypto is no different. So again, my assumption, my personal opinion, is that as long as RBI knows where the money has come into the system, where it's going, and what is the tax status of the people involved in that transaction, RBI should not have any problem in that transaction. So that's where I see it going. As long as your KYC, KYB is in place and everything is linked, RBI should be cool with it.
Hello, sir.
So, and to add to that, see, as Maddie was earlier talking about, crypto's also being used for a lot of bad stuff. Okay, there is an entire thing around anti-terrorism, etc., that comes into play, money laundering. So all of your AML side, so all of those different things are at play. Because it is very difficult for anyone to figure out when are you not gaming the system. Okay, because in crypto, if there is no link behind it, there is no base currency behind it. You saying I bought 10 XYZ coins of something which are now suddenly valued at 1,000. What is the base behind it, right? That becomes a problem. However, that being said, India has also launched out its own CBDC. I would highly recommend that you look into that. And India as a whole, and we are also working towards the CBDC model. And the good thing about CBDC, and I don't know much about it right now, so I have yet to get into it, is an entire concept of being able to say purpose control it. And I'll give you a simple purpose control model to it, right? Somebody, as a government, for example, I want to send out money to somebody and say, this is for a woman, infant, child program. I don't want, in the current construct, I will just send money to the person's account. The person will go withdraw that money and go buy alcohol. That is not helping the woman or the infant, right? But if I can purpose control this, I can actually turn around and say this CBDC currency is purpose controlled so that you can only utilize it to buy food. So then you have to go spend it in a food shop, which means that the next set that I have to worry about is what is the MCC code, etc. of that particular shop, right? So it is not as simple as here is a currency, I've bought into it, it has grown 100x. But what is it you're using it for? As long as you're thinking about it from the perspective of not just personal gain, but also from a societal impact, and whether you're thinking about it as a good for society or good for yourself, things will change from your thought process also.
Hello, sir.
Great.
Hello.
Maybe one last question, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Bindo. I am working as intern here in web technology in Kochi. My question is also related to the CBDC currency that India is launched electronic rupee in the end of the end of the 2022. As per my knowledge, it is in the month of November 2022. And we here discussed that the fintech is the combination of the typical institutional banking institutions, and this is a combination of institutional banks and the financial technology models or the fintech companies as well. So what will be the role of these institutional banks when we are already, it is, the e-rupee is already provided here, means already launched here, but it is now in the pilot stage. So what will be the role and the importance of the typical conventional institutional banks in terms of e-rupee when it will be adopted entirely into our country? So, and my question is to Rahul sir.
See, at the end of the day, from my perspective, and as I said, I don't know too much about CBDC yet, right? I haven't gotten into that yet. But whether you're looking at e-rupee, which is again the digital format of it, or you're looking at CBDC, which is the currency that there is a lock-in part to it. However, at the end of the day, the bank is going to be absolutely essential for it, for the simple reason that the money has to go somewhere, no? The money has to be held somewhere. The money has to be transacted from somewhere. And at the end of the day, whether I send it money as P2P or I send it P2M, P2P being person to person or person to merchant, the money has to go from one bank to another bank, because only a bank can actually hold that money. So from your perspective, or from your question's perspective, what I would say is that a bank is absolutely essential to anything that we are doing in the entire fintech space, because they are the ones where the money will go and finally reside. Okay? Whatever it is doing in the middle, at the end of the day, it is not cash that I'm handing over to you and then you are handing over to 10 other people. But it is at the end of the day, it is going from one point to another point, which is a bank to a bank.
And actually, I can add a point there. So this is a very interesting topic because, see, if you think about commercial banks, right, they play a very important role. They are the balance sheet providers. They lend. So at the end of the day, if they don't hold money, they can't lend. So you can't actually disintermediate them. So many countries are actually having a dual layer where the central bank will issue the central bank digital currency, but the distribution is done via commercial banks. And another interesting point is, even in India with the e-rupee, it's not an interest-bearing asset, which means people won't convert all their savings and savings accounts into CBDC, because if they do, they won't make interest income, right? Which again prevents that disintermediation happening completely. So it'll go back to what Rahul was talking about earlier. Very programmatic, use case focused. Use cases will probably spring up, but remains to be seen.
So the banks will act as a nodal agencies or the facilitator, like what they are, how the roles currently in the UPI circle.
Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen, but that is some of the early evolutions that we're seeing of the model.
So, sorry, but UPI Circle is a different product set.
Not about the UPI circle, UPI network. I sorry for the
yes. UPI Circle is a different product set that is also available on Beam.
Yeah.
I don't know. How many of you are students out here? No one.
Students.
Students? Undergrad? Okay. So you can actually go into Beam and set it up so that if you don't have a bank account, etc., you can actually use your parents' UPI bank account link through something called UPI Circle and transact from there. But your parents will be able to set locks onto it also and say there are certain amounts that you can only transact in a month and all of those things. So these are things that are already there. So UPI Circle, I'm sorry, is a different product set kind of thing.
That's a mispronunciation from my part. I mentioned, I just want to mention that as a UPI network. In UPI network, conventional banks act as a facilitators.
Got it. Yeah, it's an analogy in some ways.
I'd like to add one small thing to that. So I don't know how many of you have used UPI Lite. UPI Lite. Okay, because I think it's a phenomenal product.
Yeah.
Like it's a extremely good product. It lets you use UPI without an internet connection, without anything, pretty much. And so coming back to CBDC, I think there will be a very good use case for CBDCs in offline payments, because it's much easier to track offline payments using a CBDC.
But in terms of digital, CBDC rupee is also a kind of cashless process as per my knowledge, I think.
It is absolutely cashless. And also the model is actually mature when it comes to blockchain. So there are two US companies who are de facto I would say not CBDC, but reserve currency. So there's USDT, which is Tether, and then there's USDC, which is, both are private companies. One is a company called Tether, the other one is a private company called Circle. And both, their market caps are like crazy, $140 billion, the other one is like $40 billion. And they are audited every month and they provide bank. End of the day, the word is bank. That money which they have collected to issue their tokens are sitting in a regulated bank.
Okay, all right.
And a regulated auditor provides a piece of paper that says we have checked their bank account and they have the reserve cash. So there is something backing that currency. So the thing backing that currency is real currency, which is US dollars. So they always have a 1:1 reserve or whatever ratio they have, right? So similarly, I think in India, of course, the CBDC will come, but I'm really hoping that a good private player also comes in to provide competition in the market. There's nothing that says we should not. So for example, we only had LIC. Now we have so many private insurance players. So competition is good. And India is ripe for competition. So I'm hoping that competition comes in this segment also in India.
All right. So typical banks will have in such a role having this kind of tokenization and those kind of validation for the transactions, I think.
That's right. So if you are a private company in India and if you want to innovate in this space, I would highly recommend you get in touch with the FIU and give them a proposal.
All right.
And they will actually read it. And even I was surprised first when I understood this, but they actually read everything we send them. And if they really like your idea and they trust you, prima facie, they'll collect your documents, check upon who you are, and for all you know, you may get the license to actually launch a rupee-pegged token in India, where the money is held in an Indian bank.
All right. Thanks, sir. Thank you for the answers.
Okay. On that note, I think we're out of time. I'm just looking at the organizers. But excellent session. Thank you, fellow panelists, and great questions as well. I think we covered a range of topics from the evolution to where this could go. I think crypto and CBDC was a good stop at the end as well. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, all four of you. Of course, it was quite an interesting and a very exciting session, having taken us from the very beginnings to what we are now and where we are heading to. Thank you once again, and may I humbly request you to kindly let us express our deep-hearted gratitude to you. So yes, may I now humbly request the luminous founder of the Expresso Global, who is also the co-founder for the Money Conclave 2024, Mr. Aftab Shaukat, to kindly join with us, and please pass on our souvenir to Ms. Lizzie Chapman. Ma'am, kindly accepted, and we absolutely loved the way you narrated how you got hooked to the Indian economy. It was, thank you so much for that. Yes, we could applaud more. I encourage you to applaud even louder. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Aftab. Now may I humbly request the Chief Business Officer of NPCI, Mr. Rahul Handa, to kindly accept a token of love from Mr. Ibnu Jala, the founder of Fintech and our the founder for Money Conclave. Mr. Ibnu Jala, can we kindly have you here with us? Thank you. Let us all put our hands together for these two gentlemen. Yes, of course, they have given us a very, very excitement-filled, very information-filled session, and the applauses needs to be more energetic too, please. Thank you so much, the both of you. And now may I humbly request the respected director of the B School International, Mr. Shihabuddin, to kindly join with us on the stage and pass on our token of love and appreciation to Mr. Madhavan Ramakrishnan as well. So can we kindly have you here, Mr. Shihabuddin, the Honorable Director of B School International. And Mr. Madhavan Ramakrishnan, may I humbly request you to kindly accept it from the sir. And thank you so much for highlighting the Indian government's contribution to the current fintech. And lastly, it is the time for us to be appreciating our moderator who have very effectively taken us through the three phases of fintech, the evolution, the present scenario, and where we are leading to, where we are leaping to. So yes, may I humbly request yet another co-founder of Malabar Angel Network, Mr. Shilin, to kindly join with us and kindly join with us in expressing our appreciation to Mr. Vineet Mohan for having coordinated such a smooth and a very informative session. Thank you so much, sir. You may now kindly step down, and may humbly request all of our speakers to kindly join together for a group photograph, a memory to stow by. And may I once again request all of you to kindly applaud. It's when you applaud that your energy spikes up, and it is only when your energy is up that you actually start grasping more and make the better of today. Please, thank you. And thank you so much, all four of you. It was great having you here.